My husband chose his mother over me for 7 years. Until one day I walked away without saying a word. I never imagined that the biggest battle of my marriage wouldn't be about money, trust, or love. It would be about respect. My name is Naina. I'm 31 years old, and until 6 months ago, I believed that if you loved someone enough, they would eventually choose you. I was wrong. When I married Rohan, everyone said I was lucky. He had a stable government job in Jaipur, came from a respected family, and always spoke softly. During our engagement, he promised me something I'll never forget. Naina, he said while we were sitting in a small cafe, my wife will always come first. Those words became the foundation of my dreams. After our wedding, I moved into his family home. It was a beautiful 2-story house where Rohan lived with his parents and younger sister. The first few weeks were perfect. Everyone smiled, everyone praised me, everyone acted like I was the daughter they always wanted. Then reality arrived. Every morning, I woke up at 5. I cooked breakfast for 6 people, prepared lunch boxes, cleaned the kitchen, washed clothes, swept the floors, made tea every few hours. My mother-in-law never actually ordered me around. She simply expected everything to be done before she asked. Whenever guests visited, she proudly said, "Our daughter-in-law does everything. She's very obedient." People smiled. I smiled too, but nobody noticed how exhausted I was. Whenever I tried to sit down for 5 minutes, there was always another task waiting. One afternoon, I told Rohan quietly, "I'm feeling a little overwhelmed." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Mom is old. Help her a little more." That was the first time I realized my feelings came second. Months passed, then years. Every festival became another competition. If I decorated the house, my mother-in-law complained the colors were wrong. If I cooked sweets, they weren't sweet enough. If I wore a sari, it wasn't traditional enough. No matter what I did, I was always one mistake away from criticism. Rohan always had the same answer. "She's my mother. Don't argue." I stopped arguing. Instead, I stayed silent. Silence became my survival strategy. When our daughter, Mira, was born, I thought everything would change. I believed becoming parents would finally bring us closer. Instead, it gave my mother-in-law even more control. She decided what the baby should eat. She decided when the baby should sleep. She even decided what clothes my daughter could wear. Whenever I disagreed, she laughed. "You young girls don't know anything." One evening, Mira developed a high fever. I wanted to take her to the hospital immediately. My mother-in-law insisted it was just the weather. She gave the baby homemade remedies and refused to let us leave. I looked at Rohan. "Please say something." He looked at his mother. Then at me. Finally he whispered, "Let's wait until morning." That night was the longest night of my life. Mira's fever climbed higher. Around 3 in the morning, I ignored everyone. I wrapped my daughter in a blanket, booked an auto, and rushed to the hospital alone. The doctor looked serious. "If you had waited a few more hours, things could have become dangerous." I felt my legs go weak. When we returned home later that day, I expected concern. Instead, my mother-in-law scolded me. "You embarrassed this family by leaving without permission." Without permission. Those words echoed in my mind for days. Not one person thanked me for protecting my daughter. Not even my husband. That evening, he actually apologized. To his mother, not to me. I cried quietly after everyone slept. No one heard, or maybe they simply didn't care. Years continued passing like that. Birthdays, anniversaries, festivals, every celebration looked happy in photographs. Behind those smiles, I was disappearing. One Sunday, I met my college friend Priya after almost 8 years. She looked at me for less than 2 minutes before asking, "Naina, are you okay?" I smiled automatically. "I'm fine." She held my hand. "No, you're pretending." For the first time in years, someone noticed. I broke down in the middle of the cafe. I cried harder than I ever had. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, she asked me one question. "Naina, if Mira grows up watching all this, what will she learn?" That question haunted me. I couldn't sleep that night. I looked at my sleeping daughter. She was only 6 years old. Already she had started apologizing for things that weren't her fault. Just like me, the next morning, something happened that changed everything forever. While serving breakfast, I accidentally dropped a steel bowl. It made a loud noise. My mother-in-law stood up and shouted, "You can't even do one simple job properly." Before I could respond, she slapped me across the face. The room fell silent. I looked at Rohan, my husband, the man who had promised I would always come first. He watched everything, and said absolutely nothing. At that exact moment, something inside me died. Not my love, not my hope, my fear, and for the first time in 7 years, I started planning my exit. That slap stayed on my face for only a few seconds, but inside me, it left a mark that would never disappear. I looked at Rohan one last time, hoping he would finally speak. He lowered his eyes and quietly continued eating breakfast. Not a single word, not even, "Are you okay?" That silence hurt far more than the slap. I finished serving everyone, went into my room, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. There was a faint red mark on my cheek. I touched it gently and whispered, "This is the last time." For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't crying. I was calm. That scared me more than anything. Over the next few days, I behaved exactly as I always had. I cooked. I cleaned. I smiled when guests visited. No one noticed that something had changed. Inside, I had already decided. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life begging for respect. One afternoon, I secretly updated my resume. Before marriage, I had worked as an accountant for nearly 3 years. I had left my job after everyone in the family insisted that a good daughter-in-law should stay home. Now, I wondered if I still had a chance. I sent applications to every company I could find. Days passed. Then one evening, while everyone was watching television, my phone vibrated. It was an email. A company in Jaipur wanted to interview me. My hands started shaking. It wasn't a job yet. But it was hope. The interview was scheduled for Monday morning. I knew my in-laws would never allow me to go. So I told them I was visiting Priya. It was the first lie I had told since my marriage. The interview went better than I expected. The manager looked at my resume and asked, "Why did you leave your previous job?" I smiled politely. "Family responsibilities." He nodded without asking anything else. 2 days later, they called again. "We'd like to offer you the position." For a few seconds, I couldn't even speak. I finally had a way to stand on my own feet again. The salary wasn't huge, but it was enough. Enough to rent a small apartment. Enough to buy food. Enough to raise my daughter with dignity. I accepted immediately. The real challenge began when I told Rohan. That night, after everyone went to bed, I showed him the offer letter. "I've accepted a job." He looked surprised. "You accepted without asking me?" "I informed you. I didn't ask for permission." He stared at me as if I had become a stranger. The next morning, my mother-in-law found out. She exploded with anger. "So now you'll leave the house every day while strangers raise your daughter?" I answered calmly, "I'll take care of Mira." She laughed. No respectable woman works when her husband earns enough. For the first time, I didn't stay silent. No respectable family treats their daughter-in-law like a servant either. The room became completely silent. My father-in-law looked shocked. Rohan whispered, "Enough." I looked at him. "No, Rohan, 7 years have been enough." I walked away before anyone could stop me. That evening, my phone rang again. It was Priya. "How did it go?" "I got the job." She screamed with happiness. "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words made my eyes fill with tears. I had forgotten what encouragement felt like. A week later, I started working. The first salary wasn't much. Still, I bought something special. A small chocolate cake. Mira clapped happily as we cut it together. She asked, "Mama, what's the celebration?" I smiled. "It's the first thing I've earned for myself." She hugged me tightly. "I'll celebrate every salary with you." That innocent promise became my strength. But peace never lasts forever. One evening, I returned home a little late because of traffic. My mother-in-law was waiting near the front door. Without saying hello, she snatched my handbag. She searched through every pocket. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm checking where you've spent your money." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. She even opened my wallet and counted every note. Then she held out her hand. "Give me your salary." I froze. What? Every woman in this family gives her income to the household. I looked at Rohan. He was standing only a few feet away. He didn't stop her. Instead, he quietly said, "Just give it to Mom. It'll avoid unnecessary arguments." Something inside me snapped again. I took the envelope containing my salary. For a moment, everyone thought I was about to hand it over. Instead, I placed it back into my handbag. Then I looked directly at my mother-in-law. "This is the first money I've earned after 7 years. I worked for it, and for the first time in my life. I'm keeping every single rupee." Her face turned bright red with anger. She shouted so loudly that neighbors began looking through their windows. "You've become arrogant," I replied in a calm voice. "No, I finally remembered my worth." She pointed toward the main door. "If you don't follow this family's rules, then leave this house." The entire room went silent. Everyone waited for my answer. I looked at my daughter. Then at the suitcase resting on top of the cupboard. For 7 years, it had remained untouched. Maybe, its time had finally come. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. My mother-in-law stood near the front door with her arms crossed, waiting for me to apologize. My father-in-law looked down at the floor as if none of this concerned him. Rohan avoided my eyes, and Mira, my little 7-year-old daughter, held my hand so tightly that I could feel her fingers trembling. I looked around the living room that had been my home for 7 years. Every wall held family photographs, wedding pictures, festival celebrations, birthdays, smiling faces. Anyone looking at those pictures would think we were the perfect family. Only I knew how much pain was hidden behind those smiles. My mother-in-law broke the silence. "Well, didn't you hear me? If you can't follow the rules of this house, then leave." I expected Rohan to stop her. Instead, he sighed and said, "Naina, just say sorry. Why are you making such a big issue out of this?" I looked at him in disbelief. A big issue. Your mother searched my handbag, counted my salary, and demanded every rupee I earned. And you think I'm the one creating the problem? He rubbed his forehead. You're overreacting. That sentence ended the conversation for me. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply walked into our bedroom. Behind me, I could hear my mother-in-law muttering, "She'll calm down in 10 minutes." She didn't know me anymore. I opened the cupboard and pulled down the old blue suitcase that had gathered dust for years. The zipper made a loud sound as I opened it. Mira stood quietly beside me. "Mama," I smiled at her. "We're packing." She looked confused. "Are we going on vacation?" I knelt beside her and gently held her shoulders. "No, sweetheart, we're going somewhere we'll be happy." She didn't fully understand, but she nodded. Children understand emotions better than words. I packed only what belonged to us. A few clothes, school books, important documents, my certificates, the little savings I had hidden over the years. Nothing more. When I carried the suitcase into the living room, everyone stared. My mother-in-law laughed. "So you're really acting like a heroine now?" I calmly replied, "No. I'm acting like a mother." She pointed toward Mira. "The child stays here." My heartbeat stopped for a moment. "What did you say?" "She's our family's granddaughter. You can leave if you want, but she isn't going anywhere." Before I could answer, Mira wrapped both arms around my waist. "I'm going with Mama." Those 6 words echoed through the room. My mother-in-law tried to pull her away. Mira cried louder. "No, I want Mama." For the first time, my father-in-law spoke. "Enough. Don't frighten the child." Rohan finally stepped forward. He crouched beside Mira. "Beta, stay here tonight. Mama will calm down." Mira looked straight at him. "Dad, why do you never help Mama?" The room fell silent again. Children often ask the questions adults are afraid to answer. Rohan had no reply. Neither did anyone else. I picked up the suitcase with one hand and held Mira's hand with the other. As we reached the front door, my mother-in-law shouted, "If you leave today, don't ever come back." I paused. Without turning around, I answered, "A house where respect doesn't exist stopped being my home a long time ago." Then I walked out. It was nearly 9 at night. The streets were busy, but I had never felt more alone. Priya answered my call on the first ring. "Naina, I've left." There was a brief silence. Then she said, "Stay where you are. I'm coming." 20 minutes later, she arrived with her husband. Neither of them asked unnecessary questions. They simply loaded our suitcase into the car and drove us to their apartment. That night, after putting Mira to bed, Priya handed me a cup of tea. "You did the hardest part." I shook my head. "No, I think the hardest part starts tomorrow." She smiled gently. "Maybe, but tomorrow you'll wake up without fear." Those words stayed with me. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Rohan had called 23 times. My mother-in-law had sent dozens of angry messages. Some relatives accused me of breaking the family apart. Others said a good wife never leaves her husband's house. Not one message asked if I was okay. I switched off my phone. For the first time in years, I enjoyed breakfast in complete peace. A week later, with help from my office and Priya, I rented a small 1-bedroom apartment. It wasn't luxurious. The paint was old. The kitchen was tiny. The bedroom barely fit a double bed. But when Mira ran through the empty rooms laughing, it felt bigger than any mansion. That evening, we bought 2 plastic chairs and sat on the balcony eating simple vegetable pulao from paper plates. "Mama," Mira said with a smile, "this house is small." I laughed. "It is. But," she looked up at the stars. "It's very quiet." I smiled. "Do you like that?" She nodded. "I can finally hear you laughing." I couldn't hold back my tears. Children notice everything. That night, after Mira fell asleep, I checked my phone again. There was one new message from an unknown number. It read, "You think you've won. Wait until you receive the legal notice." My hands froze. I read the message again. There was no name, no explanation, only that single sentence. For the first time since leaving the house, I realized my fight had only just begun.